Hey everyone, welcome to Truthfulness Amplify Conference. We're just going to give it a few minutes while everyone logs in. Just want to quickly say thanks to Ryan for this morning's session. It was some great insights into branding and marketing, and especially how to pivot during a pandemic. Just want to remind everyone that there'll be another session at 1:30 with Sharif Jamel, and the topic will be all about the leads. And I think we'll just give it a few more seconds while people log in. I do want to remind everyone that if you have Teams, Zoom, or any other browser or communication tool open, it will slow down your feed. And we had a few glitches in this morning's session. And throughout the presentation, you'll see a Q&A tab along the side there. You're allowed to submit questions, and we'll hold them all to the end. And if we don't get to them, we're going to record everything and send out some answers and questions and all the material that we can starting next week. So without dragging the intro out too long, I just want to first thank Jeff McCann from Apollo for attending, and he's going to share some insights into the emerging trends and segments that are coming out of the new normal that we're all facing here in the pandemic. So Jeff, take it away.
Fantastic. Thanks very much, Tom. Again, my name is Jeff McCann. I'm founder and CEO of the Apollo Exchange. We're a digital distribution platform for predominantly small business insurance products, as well as personal lines products. So everything we do is quote, bind, issue. Really excited to be part of the Amplify conference put on by Truthfulness, and hopefully everyone can hear okay. I think they'll put my slides up in a sec here, and I'll be able to click through, and we'll get going. And so the entire theme here is, what are the emerging trends given the new normal? And so obviously COVID has fundamentally changed lots of different industries. Insurance is one of those being impacted. And so we're just going to talk about being able to think like a venture capitalist, think like an investor, and be able to target these new opportunities, think about the insurance implications, and then how we can take those and try and serve our clients better and perhaps drive revenue as well. As a starting point, we're going to look back at some of the trends we might have missed in the past. And a lot of people always say, man, I wish I bought Uber at the very beginning. I wish I was in early on those stocks. And you want to think about that from an insurance perspective as well. And so early in 2008, we saw the beginning of the sharing economy. So for the first time, a homeowner's policy wasn't going to respond to a short-term rental or a commercial. So there had to be an insurance solution to that. When AWS launched, it became cloud-based services, and all of a sudden smartphones and apps, and that fundamentally accelerated those markets. The sharing economy continued through Uber and auto insurance. And I think longer term, you're talking about autonomous vehicles, or will people own vehicles, and the insurance implications of that. Obviously, cryptocurrencies is still a very, very challenging market to place, but still billions of dollars of market cap. And then you have crossover of exposures, where a photographer now has an aviation exposure because they're using a drone, or a construction company or land surveyors are using drones. And this came out, the very first DJI Phantom was in 2013. And so that is an aviation exposure that got brought into new industries and created a lot of momentum. Around 2018, the Target symbol there, that was the year of the retail hack. So Target had a massive cyber event. Home Depot and other retailers were seeing huge cyber events. And all of a sudden, front page of every newspaper was millions and millions of records. And I think we've seen that even with Marriott Hotels and others, where there's been these massive breaches even now, and cyber insurance is on the forefront. And then with the legalization of marijuana, going from greenhouses that were, previously growing vegetables, now it's a marijuana operation, through the supply chain down to retailers. And even now with edibles and other products, how is that changing the bakery industry? How is that changing these different emerging risks? And so these are usually front page headlines. These are things we're seeing every day. So what I'm going to do throughout the rest of the presentation is show some headlines, talk about things that have happened during coronavirus, the things that we're looking at Apollo and saying, well, how can we build product to address these markets? How can we serve our brokers by creating product? And how can we look at these emerging segments and opportunities? Which ones are here to stay? Which ones might be a fad? And then what are the insurance and risk implications? Everybody sees these headlines, but a lot of people out there in their day-to-day lives aren't thinking about insurance. They're thinking, oh, I want to get in on that stock, or that's a cool feature, that's a cool service. But it's our job as professionals in our industry to be thinking, what are the risk implications for our clients? So when we think about the new normal, I mean, we're on a different platform now, but I'm sure everybody's had a Zoom call over the last couple of months. Zoom market cap is totally increased. And now even this conference going from what would have been in person and a special event or an event liability exposure to a totally online experience. This is a really cool graph. It shows delivery services. And so you can't really see as well, but some of the smaller ones, the red line is food delivery, but that huge green line is grocery delivery. So now you have grocery stores that are pivoting and they're taking on a new exposure in delivery. You're having individuals that are driving their personal cars for business use and this huge spike, and likely grocery delivery is here to stay. And some of the less obvious ones. So groceries, pretty obvious. Everyone kind of knows that, it's on the surface. One of the interesting stats I found is year over year, 2019 to 2020 in March, the second fastest growing e-commerce product was bread makers. The very first, the number one was latex gloves. That makes sense. Coronavirus, people are buying hand sanitizer, latex gloves. But the second at a growth rate of 650% was bread makers. And so there's the obvious ones like latex gloves, like grocery delivery, but there's also going to be huge emerging markets where you're not really expecting it, where the headlines might not necessarily be. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through 5 products or 5 sort of sets of headlines and how we think that there's going to be big insurance opportunity. So if you're a producer, I want you to be thinking, how can I get out? How can I grow my market, grow my book because of these new segments? Or if you're just trying to service your existing client base, how can you get ahead of it and think, okay, this is something that's going to hit me. People are going to walk in the front door. They're going to be calling in, asking about this. So how can we respond as a broker? I just always love this one before I kick it off. The pessimist says glass is half empty. The optimist says it's half full. And particularly around coronavirus, there's a lot of optimism and pessimism. But the sales rep says, let's talk about the benefits of ice. So if you're a producer out there, no matter what, you got to get up in the morning. You got to serve your clients. You have to try and grow your book and grow your brokerage. We have to all navigate this. And so we're saying, how can we think about what's the benefits of ice? So our first opportunity we're going to talk about is cyber liability. So this is actually interesting. This is a spam or a phishing email that got sent to one of my staff. So it's a firsthand example. Lucky Google caught it and flagged it. And you can see it's my first name in the email title. Obviously, they didn't do that great of a job creating a Gmail address, but you will see a lot of these types of emails that have one letter that's off. Maybe it's a slight misspelling, an I that looks like an L. And it's because everyone's working from home, accounting departments, different business functions, you're seeing a lot of these types of emails circulating. And even the Canadian press said there's a 4,000% increase in ransomware emails during COVID. Everyone had to shift to digital. Everyone's now communicating via email or Slack. People are working from home, which is a totally different environment. And so there's a big opportunity for hackers and ransomware emails that you might be a little more casual to open, that you might not think of if you're sitting in the office, down the hall or sitting next to someone who might have sent that email. There's obviously a lot of cyber criminals that are really targeting using the coronavirus as an opportunity for them. And so this is one example of a headline that you might have seen around response being targeted by ransomware. Now, ransomware is where a hacker will come in, they'll take over your server or they'll take over your website and they'll make you pay them in order to get access back. And so they'll basically shut down your operation until you can get that access back and make you pay for it. And so cyber liability, number one, it's an E&O exposure for brokers if you're not having this conversation with your clients. So you need to be educating your clients. You need to be proactive in this conversation. Yeah, there's a lot of businesses facing challenges, facing revenue challenges. No one wants to spend more money. It's a hard market in insurance. We have to get comfortable having difficult conversations. And so you have to be thinking this is an E&O exposure. If one of my clients has a claim that's not covered because I didn't have that conversation, that's my professional responsibility to be talking about cyber insurance with those clients. Second point I want to make is make sure that you're offering real coverage. Now, there are a lot of bolt-on coverages. It'll be a $100,000 limit that gets added on. There's nothing wrong with those, but you really have to be having a conversation about a full comprehensive cyber policy with your commercial clients that really is evaluating how many records they have, What is their exposure? And remember, it's not just credit card records, it's names, it's addresses, it's the most mundane information is now protected by Castle. We have to make sure, and PIPEDA, we have to make sure that we're having that conversation. And even the most simple small businesses carry this exposure. One of the factors or one of the coverages that can be included, but a lot of cyber coverages don't include it, so you have to really be careful of this, it's a big blind spot, is social engineering. And what that means is, just like the example I showed you of Josh on our team getting an email from me, if you wire transferred some third-party account an amount of money or paid a bill, it's not actually covered by a lot of cyber insurance policies because there was no hack and it was an individual human who made that wire transfer. And so social engineering is where a cyber criminal is manipulating someone on your team, someone within your organization to send funds because they think it's a fake invoice. They think it's a request from the CEO or the CFO. And a lot of coverages or a lot of policies won't pick that up. And so one of the great quotes from a cyber expert was that the cyber insurance, our biggest threat isn't our systems, it's our people. It's people that are opening emails. It's people that are sending those wire transfers, not thinking twice. They're responding because the CEO sent them an email and they want to get it done right away. So they're sending funds. And a lot of those aren't covered by a traditional policy. So it's really important that you keep that in mind when you're reading through a cyber wording, because it's not just hacking. Everyone thinks, oh, I'm not going to be a target for a hack. But oftentimes it's where it's that type of phishing email or it's that manipulation where it's a person on the team that inadvertently creates a cyber event because of that. Opportunity number 2 is tent trailers and Pleasurecraft. Now, pivoting from cyber, which is very much talking about a commercial exposure, this is more on the personal line side. So when we talk about news headlines, the borders are closed. So I know so many people that have places in Arizona, places in Palm Springs. Maybe you're going to go on a trip to Mexico, trip to Europe. All that's obviously closed. And it looks like it's going to be closed for the foreseeable future. There's no real indication that, particularly in the US market, that there's a slowing of the virus. And so they're going to be very, very cautious with non-mandatory or non-business travel into those markets. The second factor is gas prices. Obviously, oil tank gas prices hit a 5-year low, and we continue to expect that there's going to be a decrease in gas prices. So people can't travel abroad. They have to stay within Canada. They have to sort of stay locally. Gas prices are also low. So these are the news headlines that we're seeing. It's like, well, what are the implications of this? The third one that was really interesting is the British Columbia Parks website. On the first day that it reopened campsites, it crashed because there was so much traffic to it. So we're seeing these indications that people want to travel locally. They want to get out of the city. They want to be able to take their family, give their kids a little space to run around. They're not going a little bit stir crazy in the house. And so the BC Parks website crashed because so many people are trying to book campsites to be able to go and travel and be able to, get out of the city a little bit because they can't travel abroad. The other interesting headline is BC boat dealers are seeing record sales. And so we're seeing gas prices. People can't travel internationally. They want to go camping. They want to go boating. So from an insurance perspective, and this is again where whether it's inbound requests on a service side or whether it's producers that are looking to try and capture some of this opportunity, tent trailer and Pleasurecraft, I'm super bullish on. I think they're going to be expanding markets during the COVID summer. So it's really important that you educate your team both on the coverages that are required as well as where you can place that coverage. You want to be finding digital and efficient ways. These are small policies. This is something that you don't want to be spending hours and hours dealing with because you get that phone call because someone comes and walks into the storefront that they've had that boat sitting in the parking lot or sitting in the garage for years and years. They want to get that out in the water. It's also a growth opportunity. It's a really cool way for personal lines brokerages to cross-sell. If you're using email campaigns, if you have a CRM, if you're able to outreach and have a touch point with your client and say, hey, we know a lot of people are going to be traveling locally. Is there a boat sitting in the back that we can now insure? We can grow that. A lot of people talk about account rounding. They talk about that cross-sell. It's not something that happens that effectively, but these two products I think are really going to see a spike. So you're going to have inbound requests and they're also going to have a sales opportunity. Now, inevitably, it's like Friday afternoon, they're packing up the van for an early morning Saturday. They're going to get the whole family off. And it's that last minute, did you get the insurance? We see this all the time where it's that last minute request. And that's really an opportunity where that client can come into that experience with your brokerage and be frustrated. They can say, oh, it was the worst. I couldn't talk to them. They had their COVID, health plan in place. It's obviously the health of your staff is important, but you still have to be able to fulfill that service promise. And the way you're going to do that is by thinking about these two products, getting ahead of it, preparing your team for this spike in these two areas, and looking at it like an opportunity to fulfill that service promise, demonstrate the value and the role of the broker, and be able to get ahead of it with your team. The next one we're looking at is renters insurance. So here's some trends. This is the BC unemployment stats. If you look down at the bottom, the age groups are there. So 15 to 24, 25 to 54, and 55 and over. And the reason I highlight that is that there's an entire generation of young people that are basically getting wiped out. They're getting hit disproportionately from unemployment during COVID. And what that means is that they're going to have student loans. They're getting hit disproportionately. And that's going to be a renter that's going to stay in the rental pool longer before home ownership becomes a viable option, particularly in markets like Vancouver and Toronto, where home ownership is already very, very challenging. You already have prices that are outside of a reasonable index. CMHC is putting a lot of controls in place because they're very cautious around mortgages in the mortgage market. You're seeing an entire generation, a 10-year gap there that's sort of following the millennials that's really, really being hit hard. And we can expect that that's going to be a prolonged class of renters who are then going to be carrying on as a renter insurance policy, and they're not going to be entering the home insurance market on the same scale. So when you're looking at your book, that 55 and over, a lot of them are downsizing or they're staying in their house, and you're not seeing that younger generation that's going to end up with a standalone homeowners policy. So your book is going to change from a lot of homeowners policies. You're going to have a pivot into more renters, not only because millennials are more likely to rent, but also COVID has really impacted the economics of young people in the rental pool or the homeowners market. The other thing that's happening is you're having a ton of investment banks, private equity companies, or development companies that are holding assets longer than usual. So they're building a condo building. They can't sell those as condos. So those are going into the rental pool, but they're not like an individual, like I'm renting one-to-one with an individual. What they are is they're corporate landlords. And so there are differences when there's a corporate landlord who's going to make renters insurance mandatory as part of their lease. They're going to make sure they're doing that rental insurance check before that move-in date. And they're going to be a lot more diligent because they're a professional management company, as opposed to when you have an individual renting their basement suite or someone that's just kind of, hey, here's the keys. Yeah, sign the basic lease that you downloaded. Very casual relationship. You're going to see a large proponent of corporate landlords and professionally managed rental buildings, rental properties, which is going to not only have, again, an increase into the rental market because of the young generation staying on in the rental pool, but now they're going to be renting from corporate landlords. And so that creates an opportunity for tenants insurance, because right now, less than 50% of renters actually buy tenants insurance. Because again, in that casual basement suite type relationship, people aren't necessarily checking for that insurance certificate, whereas with a corporate landlord, they want to see that insurance is provided. So this is both an opportunity, but it's also a pain point because those policies are so small and they're going to have to be managed. So your brokerage portfolio on the personal line side is going to pivot from a larger homeowners account to a lot of smaller renters insurance accounts, because they're going to actually see a growth in the rental insurance pool going from less than 50%. And we're going to presume that because of these corporate relationships, we're going to see an increase in the actual number of people buying renters insurance. And part of that isn't just that there's a corporate landlord, it's that there's a real exposure. Because people are at home, they're cooking more, they're in their kitchens more, and we're actually seeing a spike in residential fires in condo buildings because people are at home more and they're cooking more. So not only is now there a mandatory contractual growth in the market because you have corporate landlords, but the real exposure is actually increasing. And so that might end up with a hardening market driving prices up a bit in the rental insurance market. market, but there is a very, very real exposure. And so people are going to become more and more aware of that exposure, and they're going to buy a policy when maybe they wouldn't have before. And so being able to pay monthly, service opportunities like that, but we're going to see there's actually an increase in the exposure combined with an increase in corporate landlords that's going to grow the rental insurance market, and it's just going to grow it as an opportunity. This is a funny picture. I was at my friend's house the other day, and the pizzas were getting cold, so she put them in the oven. And it was on at like 350 or something. And it's like, it happens that quickly. So it's kind of a funny thing when you're like, oh, that's not going to happen to me. You know, I'm never going to start a fire in my kitchen. People are microwaving their masks to try and clean them, starting fires. You're seeing kitchen fires because of something as simple or as easy as this. And then there's also the fact that you're going to have standard water damage claims. There was one recently in Vancouver where the 30th floor had a pipe burst and it flooded all the way to the 7th floor. And so all those individual renters or those condos are now going to be impacted by that claim. And so just to summarize the rental insurance market, why we're very bullish on it, we think there's a ton of opportunity there, but also it's going to be a service burden because those policies are small. So we've got corporate landlords and an increase in the corporate landlord pool. Right now, less than half currently have insurance. And so you're going to see an expansion in the number of buyers that are actually purchasing the coverage. The exposure is very real. One, for the actual physical damage to your contents, to the unit. You want that liability coverage as a landlord, that if you do start that fire, they can claim against that. But the other big one, and this is where, especially with like the water damage example, you have that extra living expenses. And so if you have to get put up in a hotel, if your condo gets flooded because 5 stories up, the dishwasher pipes went, you want to make sure that those clients have that extra living expenses built in, where they can then take those funds and find somewhere else to rent, or they can take those funds and they're getting put up in a hotel while the restoration companies do their thing. Now, this is one thing we always hear is nobody wants to touch small premium accounts. You know, we always hear from brokers, once I've touched it, we've already lost money, that type of rhetoric. And it makes sense. You know, you have a larger homeowner's policy. You can take the time for that. You might cross-sell if they have that boat or that tent trailer, and you can account round, and now you own that account, which is a larger premium as a whole. But when it comes to these individual renters policies, you have to find efficient ways to be able to transact that business, because inevitably your book is going to transition, especially in the personal lines type brokerages. Your book's going to transition from a homeowners type book to a largely renters and perhaps condo owners book as that demographic shift happens, and as this becomes more and more of an exposure. People are going to come to your storefront. They're going to ask for this coverage. You want to be able to handle them efficiently. Again, fulfill that service promise. And the other thing is, let's not forget the lifetime value of a customer. If you fulfill that service promise, you're going to have that customer for several years. They'll be loyal to you. They'll renew. And eventually that customer is going to grow. They're going to turn into homeowners. They're going to buy other things. They're going to need travel insurance when things open up. And so you want to think lifetime value. Yeah, it might be a $300 policy today, but what's the lifetime value of that individual as they sort of grow through their sort of insurance life cycle, and they have other coverages they need? And that might turn into a life insurance policy one day, a homeowner's insurance, travel insurance. These are the types of ways you want to expand your book and think about your portfolio as it transitions to renters first, not homeowners first. My fourth opportunity is tech E&O, and that's errors and omissions or professional liability. So one of the headlines you're seeing a lot, basically everyone's at home playing video games. And so gaming and esports are totally blowing up because people are at home, school's canceled, universities are canceled. It's easier sometimes to be able to have your kid, in front of the TV, not running around bothering you while you're trying to work from home. And so we're seeing huge growth in these platforms due to COVID, and that's likely to continue to grow. Esports is an emerging segment. I think they project that it's going to be bigger than some of the actual sports leagues. And it's going to be interesting to see how real sports transition without fans, without that actual experience, and how their revenue model shifts or doesn't, and how things like esports and gaming actually grow as sort of the official sports that younger generation grows up with, and they think or treat that's actually what sports means, which is kind of sad in its own way, but neither here nor there, that creates an insurance implication because of all the companies that are building video games and the entire gaming ecosystem around technology professional liability. The other thing that's happening in the tech E&O space is brick and mortar businesses are pivoting to go online. So you're seeing what might have been an entirely brick and mortar 100% of their business, or maybe they were slightly omni-channel. Now that's shifting to an online model. It's go to our website, order from us, we're going to deliver it. It's going to be more drop shipping companies. You're going to see an acceleration of companies that are now traditional P&C type companies that you might work with. They might be a retail store. Well, now they might sort of start looking like and taking on exposures as a technology company and taking on that professional liability exposure. Maybe it's because they're developing in-house software, or they're looking at their business as a tech business as they're innovating to try and keep up with this changing new normal. Now, the tech E&O product also includes IT consultants. And so a lot of people that are probably on this call right now, and they're on the call and they have a VPN open. They've been logging into their servers on VPNs. A lot of insurance companies are trying to transition as the work from home transition happened a few months ago. I'm sure that everybody that's on this call has a little sticker on your computer that has a phone number on it that you can call for IT support. So all those IT consultants, that industry is obviously growing because you can't just get tech support from your kids. You have to have that professional service management. And so the IT segment in terms of IT consultants is also an emerging segment as businesses try and cope with what does remote work look like, as you can't turn to the person next to you and ask them questions about something that's not working on your computer. Maybe it's your VPN, maybe it's your Zoom login, maybe it's new technology that you're trying to deploy. And so that IT consultant space, when it's deploying VPNs and other technologies, that's really emerging, and that creates an entire new segment of buyers. So you're going to see a growth in the number of businesses that are offering IT consultants. Those might be first-time insurance buyers. They're going to be relatively small premium dollars to start, but there's a big opportunity to be targeting this IT infrastructure in terms of tech support and how bigger organizations that are transitioning to work from home are going to rely more and more on those types of consultants. The other thing that's happening in the IT consulting space is a lot of companies that might have been laying off individuals. Those individuals are now being solopreneurs. There's an entrepreneurship shift where they would have been covered under the insurance of a large corporation. After that layoffs occurred, now they're saying, well, I know IT, I know tech. I'm going to create a consulting business or an IT consulting business, and those are going to be individual buyers. So we're actually going to see a growth in the number of PIF, the number of policies in force around IT consultants, as there's a sort of a shift from big corporations to more solopreneurs, smaller shops, or people that are seeing this opportunity on the consulting side, and they're trying to capture it as well by starting their own consulting business. It also might be a side hustle for them where they recognize that they're already sort of in that segment and they can help businesses transition to digital. And so they're going to start these businesses and require this insurance coverage. So just to review on the tech E&O side, you have tech companies that need professional liability insurance, whether that's video game developers, SaaS platforms, software as a service, that is, platforms, and the traditional more tech-focused businesses. You're also going to see emerging risks with your existing client base, where there's brick and mortar businesses that are pivoting to digital. They're taking on that exposure, and it's a conversation that you need to be having with them. As they're looking at that, it's just like when there was a big pivot from businesses to make hand sanitizer, businesses to make PPE for COVID, taking on way different exposures than their traditional policy is designed to cover. You're going to see this on a long-term horizon with brick and mortar businesses pivoting into tech. There's also going to be new markets that will be invented from this. There's going to be entire segments that will be serving new emerging markets. There's going to be apps that will be invented for grocery delivery services. There's going to be an entire segments around those types of emerging markets based on sort of the new normal. And a lot of those are going to take on a tech, exposure. And then, of course, we talked about IT consultants. But the other thing is, as those brick and mortar businesses become more digital, you're going to have website design companies that are saying, hey, your storefront isn't brick and mortar. Your front door is your website. And so businesses that have sort of leg, and I know Truthfully does fantastic work in the brokerage website space, where a lot of brokerages are saying, hey, my storefronts are closed. We have to make sure that our websites are up to date. We're thinking about SEO. We're thinking about how we're engaging our customers digitally. You're going to see that not just in insurance, but you're going to see that throughout a ton of other markets where people are treating their websites as their front door. And now that website design, those companies, again, that's covered by the tech E&O product as those companies both get started and there's new businesses in that space, but also existing businesses that are taking on that exposure. My final one is pet insurance, and everyone loves a picture of a cute dog. So I thought I would wrap it up with pet insurance. So one of the interesting headlines that we saw during COVID, and we're quite bullish on this product, and we'll talk about why, is people are at home, and so everyone went out and adopted a pet. It was like one of the early things that people decided, all right, I'm going to be at home. I don't want to be lonely. I don't want to be alone. And we saw a huge spike in pet adoptions across North America. And so I'm sure a lot of people that are on this webinar, on this call, that they did that exact same thing. Now they have a cat. Now they have a dog. And so there's been a huge uptake in pet adoptions, and there's more pet owners today on a huge spike in that pet ownership market overall since the beginning of COVID. Now, the thing is, when we talk about the new normal, you have that pet. I mean, that's with you for the rest of that pet's life. You got to think beyond just that pet ownership. Yeah, you got to feed it, but there's going to be vet bills, and so the pet insurance ramifications are there. And again, Canadian shelters, same thing, record number of cats being adopted. And so we're just seeing, all right, there's a big growth in the pet ownership market. And so what are the insurance implications? Everyone's like, great, it's a cute picture of a cat. I like cat videos. And it's up to us in the industry to think, all right, let's think insurance. What are the insurance implications going to be overall for the pet market? And so if you look at that, in Sweden, almost 90% of dogs in Sweden are covered by pet insurance. So it's a tremendous penetration rate. It demonstrates how that product has a huge opportunity to become a standard product that's in everyone's kind of holster. You're going to have home, tenant, condo, auto, and it's going to be pet insurance. Same thing in Sweden. It's 60% for horses, 50% for cats. I'm not sure why dogs get a higher rate than cats. A little bit of bias there maybe. But it's really interesting that in a country like Sweden and other countries in Europe, you have a very, very high penetration rate in the pet insurance space, whereas it's a very, very small product. I think it's less than 3% of Canadian pets are insured by pet insurance. So this is, again, if you think in headlines, this is a headline. So I think it's just 3% of the estimated 14 million cats and dogs in Canada are covered by insurance. And so if you think 14 million cats and dogs pre-COVID, record number of adoptions during COVID, that number is expanding. And so you have a very, very small percentage of people that actually buy pet insurance. And yet you have this tremendous market, and we can look at other markets that are ahead of us and say, well, is there opportunities from learning where that penetration rate, I mean, to have 90% in Sweden and 3% in Canada, obviously there's room for that to totally blow up and expand. And that's going to be something that's going to be a very, very standard personal lines type exposure. It's also an account rounding opportunity, but people are going to come to you with this conversation. It's more and more in the news. They have this pet. And so just to summarize on the pet insurance product, personal lines brokerages rarely address this product. It's not something that comes up a lot. It's not something that we as an insurance community in Canada are selling with that 3% number. It's a big untapped segment. And yet in other markets in Europe, Sweden, but even the UK, I think is 18 or 20% penetration rate. You have that. The exposure is very real. My sister had a dog, ended up with having cancer. I think the vet bills were around $50,000, and it was covered by pet insurance. And so it's that type of conversation that creates an opportunity for a touch point. We can't just sit back and wait for our clients to come to us during the pandemic. We have to have touch points with them. We have to be outbound outreach. And this is an opportunity, particularly in the personal lines brokerage space. You can't really call up a personal lines client and talk about cyber, but pet insurance might be an opportunity, along with Tent Trailer and Pleasurecraft, to be able to reach out, have that touch point, have a conversation about that. And the other cool thing, if you are using a CRM, is now you can record that information. They have a dog, they have a cat, what's the animal's name? And now the next time you talk to them, or maybe you reach out for the renewal on their homeowner's policy, you can drop in a nice little personalized token around that pet. And now you're just showing that it's, even though you're trying to scale your organization, even though you're using digital tools and digital engagement, you can have these personalization tokens in your engagement because you've learned from them about what's their pet's name, what type of person are they? Are they a dog person, cat person? Going back, it can be their boat, their tent trailer. You want to be recording this information in your CRM so you can follow up, have a reason to have a conversation, make a note to follow up with them year after year on these, account round, and really grow that book of business in the pet space. And also, this is where you can take a renter's insurance policy that might be $300, but they have a cat. Maybe they have other coverages, or they want to pick up a life policy. You can make that the customer lifetime value of that individual account a lot bigger. And so I think this is going to be a segment that's totally going to explode as a result of the adoptions, the low penetration rate in the existing market, those 14 million animals that are uninsured right now. And the fact is, vet bills add up. And there's a lot of use cases and a lot more conversation now around people that have had successful experiences, having claims paid, really pleased with their experience in pet insurance. And yet it's something that really we don't talk about enough in the traditional brokerage space. It's not something that really comes up. And of course, everyone loves their animals. It's a really sort of heart-wrenching moment when an animal gets sick. And so it's a chance for you to really look at that as a service opportunity, look at that as an account rounding opportunity. So those are my 5 products. Happy to take any questions in the Q&A. I think Thomas is going to read them out. But again, cyber liability on the commercial insurance side, tent trailers and Pleasurecraft, personal lines, inter-province travel, more people camping, tech companies, IT consultants, tech E&O, and finally, our pet insurance. I'll pass it over to Thomas to field any questions that we have from the participants.
Great. So I just want to remind everyone that you can throw questions into the chat or the Q&A section, and we'll try and get to everyone that we can. So while people are putting their info in there, I actually had a quick question for you, Jeff. We talked a lot about how in brick and mortar stores are pivoting, grocery stores are pivoting. Everyone's kind of figuring out a new way to operate. What do you see as, something that insurance brokers and people on this call need to think about and pivot, like as far as operationally or how they do business?
That's a great question, Thomas. And, one of the interesting things, we launched a cyber insurance product on the platform, on the exchange, about 2 weeks into coronavirus. And a lot of brokers were reaching out to their clients, but we also had a ton of insurance brokers that were looking to buy cyber liability for themselves. And so obviously we have brokerage E&O, and that's mandatory, but I was really surprised at how many brokerages were really interested in picking up cyber liability for their own brokerage. And so as a starting point, I think when you look at these products, cyber liability is one you need as an insurance brokerage, totally critical. And so that's a really big starting point. And then the second is now you're looking at ways to have digital touch points with your clients. One of our brokers, Andrew Clark over at Aligned Insurance, he had a great email out to his entire mail list about cyber insurance. It was, hey, here's some cyber resources. Cyber's important. Here's a way that you can get a quote online. And it was just that opportunity to pivot from a brick and mortar approach to a digital approach and have the conversation at scale. And then obviously you can look at people that engage with that email, create those leads. And I think Sharif's going to talk about that later today in the conference, where it's like, this is the new normal and how we engage at scale, but you have to be having this conversation. And it's interesting also that cyber was a product that brokerages are looking to buy for themselves. And I think it's definitely important for brokerages to have their own coverage.
Yeah. And then, that's a great answer. I'm going to combine some questions here just because they kind of follow the same thought here is we assume the 5 products you talk about, are they coming to the Apollo Exchange anytime soon?
So we've got a few of them. We have a cyber liability product, goes up to 50 million in revenue, includes that social engineering. So it's a really strong product, A+ paper there. We have the Tech E&O product. That's a Berkeley product. That's a fantastic product that covers the SaaS companies as well as IT consultants. There's sort of a whole list. We've looked at, how do we get pet insurance on the platform? We don't have pet right now. I just see that as a really cool opportunity for someone to figure out. And we're looking at that. And then we actually just launched our quote bind issue renters insurance product today. And so it's awesome timing for that product. Brokers can both log into the exchange, quote bind issue, or that we have like a widget that goes on our broker website that's white labeled for the broker brand that their customers can self-serve on. And so we have those three. We don't have pet or the tent trailer and marine Pleasurecraft, but I think those are ones that we're looking at expanding into for sure. Because again, I'm super bullish on these opportunities. I think these markets are really going to expand, particularly this year, but that's going to be here to stay.
Yeah, and just so you guys know, I did fact check some of Jeff's comments on the while he was talking there, and esports is coming to colleges, and there's talk about bringing it to the Olympics. So some of these things are already happening. Another great question from Nick Roper. So with businesses moving online or relying on tech and apps to generate and do transactions, what are your thoughts on how business interruption coverage is expanding for things like for system failures or for breakdowns in networks, and for if we're all going online and the network we're working on fails, like how do you see business interruption insurance changing that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And, the business interruption space right now, obviously really, really challenged with the COVID claims and dealing with that. And I think it's going to, like anything, it'll create an opportunity, whether those claims end up getting paid or not, or regulation changes around it and governments start to create intervention around products that become mandatory or policy wordings. Whenever there's something like this event, people start to rethink it, and someone's going to start saying, well, to that exact question, how do we create insurance product, a risk transfer solution? And so, there's a combination of that Tech E&O product, making sure that your platform performs. But in the business interruption side, I think there's going to be a lot of innovation there. We worked with BI9. I think that they're 150 years old as a company. They're owned by Munich Re. And so they're going from, all right, we have steam engines on trains, to now, how do we have, a database? How do we have cloud-based systems? What's the business interruption implications of a cloud-based system? So I think those conversations are taking place, but I think there's a lot of room for innovation in the business interruption segment. There's already been some great work by BI&I, which is HSB now, I believe, on their rebranding. So they've done some great work innovating their products to respond to more digital risks. But I think there's a long way to go. And again, like we talked about with AWS creating cloud-based solutions, we talked about Uber and Airbnb. As these new segments emerge, there's going to be an entirely new segment of risk transfer insurance. And I think business interruption will be a big part of that. A lot of room to grow there, but I think the products aren't ready yet. So in the segments that I referred to today, those products exist. You can respond by serving your clients. Where I think there's going to be a lot of innovation on just the insurance and capital flow from reinsurance through the ecosystem is going to be on how we structure a contract that says, hey, a new BI claim doesn't have to have physical damage. It just has to be that there's an outage of the network, right? And that electricity, or it's something that you're relying on as if AWS is down or if Stripe's down, how does that impact our business on transactions? And I think there's a lot of room to grow in that space for sure.
Yeah, and then I had a quick question for you. Is with everything that's changed, like what is everything, all the changes in the world? What has changed for Apollo? Like, what are some of the things that you've pivoted on it recently?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. We're very fortunate. I mean, everyone has laptops. We're a nimble team. People already work from home for a day or two a week. I split a lot of my time before travel ban between Toronto and Vancouver. So we were already using Zoom and Slack and a lot of these tools. So we were fortunate that transition was to work from home was pretty seamless. where we focus a lot of our time and energy is around identifying these product opportunities, trying to, work with underwriters to build them, get them on the platform so that, these things I'm talking about, like there's 14 million pets. How does Apollo have a dialogue around serving the brokerage community with a pet product, with a Pleasurecraft product, with a tent trailer product? So the way that I operate is I'm trying to really say, look at these news releases. What are these trends? What are the insurance implications, and how can Apollo position ourselves for quote bind issue products in that segment? So a lot of time just innovating product and trying to get as much on the exchange as we can.
Yeah, and that actually leads me to another one of my personal questions for you is where do you get most of your information? Like that's kind of the thing I think we're all curious about. Is it seems like you have got a lot of great sources and almost like a crystal ball into the future. So where would you recommend people start looking for more info?
Well, I think everyone's already inundated with information, right? People are scrolling Instagram, they're getting exposed to news. People are, even in their own families and their households, their buying behavior is changing. They're reading the news every day, seeing these same headlines. The difference is, and what I really want to sort of have everyone as the takeaway from this session is, think about how is this going to change your job? How is this going to change insurance products? How is this going to change the questions that I'm going to get as an insurance broker over time? And so I think that's fundamentally what it's going to come down to, is not really where are you getting different information. It's how are you thinking like a venture capitalist, thinking like an investor and saying, okay, I want to bet on this market because I think that's going to be a market that's going to scale. And as an insurance professional, there's always going to be insurance implications. So I don't think it's necessarily changing what we're consuming. It's having that paradigm shift and saying, all right, everyone's reading about, cats and dogs being adopted. Everyone's reading about that condo fire and people, are cooking at home more and there's fires. We're seeing it on the news. We're seeing it in our feed. What can we do to respond? Even on Instagram, there's a bunch of personal trainer apps for video personal training. Everyone's doing personal training and yoga and fitness online. We have a fitness product that covers you when you're doing it online. So it's like that professional now has a new exposure because they're doing it online. It's not in person. That industry is going to change from you going to the gym to you being at home. The trick is think, what are the insurance implications and how can I capture opportunity when you're seeing those headlines?
So it's great. If anyone wants, there should be the ability to put some more questions in the Q&A section or just put them in the live chat. I see a few still coming in. And then actually, I had one more question for you when it comes to just kind of shifting for cyber. I guess the one thought I had is, would you say that most businesses that probably already have coverage, so whether it's professional liability, maybe just a regular E&O policy, or you're covering their fleet, with this transition and everyone working from home, do you see a need for almost every business to get some level of cybersecurity package?
Absolutely. I mean, one thing we've been saying for a couple of years now is cyber is the new fire, right? Everybody has a cyber insurance exposure. You have customer records. A lot of cyber policies will pick up your paper records as well. That could be HR files. That could be customer names, phone numbers, policy information. And so every industry, for the most part, has customer information. Or now with more and more industries being integrated, there's a cyber liability exposure. An example I can give you is when Walmart had their big data breach and their hack, it was actually a mom and pop sized refrigeration company that was interlinked into the Walmart systems because they were monitoring the refrigeration equipment. So very, very small business, not thinking, hey, no one's going to hack us, no exposure. Because they worked with Walmart, they ended up being the target. And then that's how the Walmart breach happened. So you're seeing a lot more integration between companies and ecosystems. And that's what's going to drive it. So everybody's got a cyber exposure. I think it's critical for brokers, if you're not already doing it, get your commercial clients on the phone, have a touch point, at least get a quote in front of them. So you're covering your E&O and you're making sure you're covering your exposure there. And then, you know what, it only takes that one person. Maybe they have a friend or another entrepreneur that has a claim. They see in the news, oh, it's another breach, or, ransomware is up, or they get an email like the one I showed everyone where it's like, oh, wow, we're getting attacked by phishing scams. This is real. And it's not, some out there nebulous thing for tech companies getting hacked. This is happening right now. That email came into an inbox at the Apollo team. I'm sure those emails are coming into your inbox as well. Everyone's got a cyber exposure. You got to have that coverage one way or the other.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, I know some people on this call who have brought gift cards that they purchased, brought them in because they thought that their boss was asking them to bring them gift cards through email. So yeah, there's a ton of strange scams out there.
Wow.
I just want to say thanks, Jeff. It doesn't look like we have too many more questions coming through, but I want to say thanks for your time. It's very valuable information. Just so everyone knows, we do have another session at 1:30, hosted by Sharif Jamel. He'll be talking about pretty much how to service your leads and how to get more leads, because at the end of the day, we're all trying to grow our businesses, and leads is the best way to do that. So thank you, Jeff. I hope to see everyone back at the 1:30 session. And just for everyone on the call still, we'll be sending out recordings and any material we can, and feel free to reach out anytime.
Yeah, thanks so much, Thomas. Thanks to Truthful and the Amplify Conference for having us. Anyone that's on the call on the session, happy to talk about these products or opportunities. Feel free to reach out. It's just jeff@apollocover.com. I think my information's on the website as well. So feel free to reach out. Happy to talk through them. Again, thanks to Truthful and the Amplify Conference. Great initiative to transition this to be digital during this time and try and serve our mutual broker friends.
Awesome. Thanks everyone for attending. Thank you.